All right, it is 2 p.m. and I'm going to get started. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. If you haven't joined us for one of our Wednesday webinars, a couple of things to keep in mind. This is just pretty much Teams, like you always use. If you have any questions, feel free to use the chat option. You don't have to raise your hand. You don't have to ask permission. Just use the chat. That way I can get to it as soon as I can. I'm going to be flying solo. I don't have anybody monitoring the chat but myself. So I'll keep an eye on it. You're not going to interrupt me. Today's topic is going to be over emergency locate request, and it's a pretty specific topic, right? So it's not like I'm going to be able to dive in over all things 811 today. But if you have a question about the emergency locate request as I'm explaining it, feel free to ask. We want to make sure that everybody's using them responsibly and correctly. So let's get started. My name is MG Govia. I'm the Education and Outreach Liaison for Oki 811. I've been with the company. I'm in my 12th year. I started out as a contact center representative and made my way from there to GIS, which is nerd speak for mapping. And then I got out of the mapping department and got into member services, where I helped ensure that members receive their locate requests the way they need to in a timely manner. And then went from there into the education department. I've been in my current role for a little bit over 6 years now. And um, if you would have asked me 15 years ago if I would be talking about digging all the time, the answer probably would have been no. But what I have found is I do have a passion to help keep people safe, help the damage prevention industry as best as I can. And this topic today, emergency locate requests, is something that there is confusion out in the field on when to use them, how to use them, how to prioritize them as a member compared to other locate requests, things of that nature. And then there's also been some law updates to hopefully help clean up some of that miscommunication that's out there as well. So we'll be talking about that here in just a moment. Like I said, this is a pretty specific topic. So if you'll give me 15 to 20 minutes of your time, we'll probably be finished about that time frame. So just a refresher real quick, just to remind you of how the process goes when there isn't an emergency, the standard of a normal locate request. So the excavator would contact OK811. They'll either use our website or go and make that phone call to us. By law in Oklahoma, you're to give 3 business days notice, right? The way the wording is 2 business days, not counting the data notification weekends or holidays, right? So it's just easier to say 3 business days than to remember all of that. You may be occasionally giving an extra day of notice with the 3 business days, but you'll never not be giving enough notice. So the reason that that's so important, it gives the locators enough time to respond to you. When that law change went into effect a few years ago, we've seen a significant decrease in both second notices and late locates. So we do see some positives coming from that. A lot of excavators question the additional time that the locators get, but it helps ensure a safer and more accurate locate. That locate request is going to be generated by one of our contact center representatives as they draw onto a map. When they draw onto that map, it lets us know what operators or facility owners and operators are in that area. And then we notify them of digging is going to be taking place. So we use that mapping, figure out who's there, send out the notifications to them. And then those members are going to respond to that request prior to the work to begin, date and time. Like I said earlier, typical notification is 3 business days. So if I call in on a Monday, the earliest I could dig would be Thursday, right? Monday doesn't count. Tuesday and Wednesday would be the 48 hours. Thursday would be when I'm digging. If I call on a Monday and I say I'm not going to dig until Friday at noon, then I've given the operators or the member companies that additional time until Friday at noon to locate that. That gives them an opportunity to prioritize that, maybe schedule some stuff around to get that locator out there on Friday instead of Tuesday because of the turnaround. So those are some things to keep in mind if you do want to give additional time for them. When those members are responding, they're going to be using the APWA color code to mark the different utilities that are below, and they're going to provide mandatory positive response. That's within the ticket. You'll see that at the bottom to show what the status of their locate is, whether it's all clear, whether they've marked, if there was any issues, things of that nature. And then the excavator's responsibility from there is to confirm the work site, or confirm those markings, I should say, before doing any work. So what they'll do is they'll do test holes, potholing, hand digging, all those phrases, to discover the 3Ds, right? The depth, the direction, and distance of those underground facilities that are in that area, so you can dig safely around that. Couple things to keep in mind. Okie Able One is not the locating service. We are a notification center. So we're going to take those inbound requests. We're going to get those out to the member companies. When I say member companies, I mean an owner or operator of underground facilities that is a member of Okie Able One to receive those locates to prevent damage of their assets. So we are not going to be the ones who are locating. We're going to notify those member companies. Those member companies are then responsible for locating, and they'll either use their in-house employees, or they may hire a third party, such as GridHawk or USIC or so many others that are out there in Oklahoma. So that's the process. Other thing to keep in mind is the private lines, right? So if a utility has turned over lines to the property owners, such as after a meter for additional electric runs, gas runs, sewer, things of that nature, those may not get marked through the A1 process because they're not owned or maintained by one of our member companies. And so if there are additional private lines beyond that, such as propane lines, French drains, sprinkler systems, things of that nature, as well as the utilities being turned over to the property owner, you may have to make an additional call to get a private line locator to help you out with those facilities if the property owner doesn't know the location of where those are. So that's how it's supposed to work. Occasionally there are going to be some emergencies and things like that. So we're going to dive into the different notifications and then dive into what makes an emergency locate request correct. So a normal compliant locate request is what we just described. You're giving the proper amount of time. You're compliant with the law. A non-compliant locate request is less than required notice, and there's not an emergency, which means it's not a valid locate request. This usually happens with homeowners. It's not really a professional excavator mistake. But what it is I call in on a Thursday and I let Okie Able One know that I'm going to be planting trees on Saturday, right? So we know from what we just talked about that Thursday is not enough notice for Saturday, right? So if I insist that I'm still going to dig on Saturday because I went and rented tools from Lowe's or wherever the case may be, Okie Able One will still process a request that'll be a courtesy notification out to facility operators in the area, but it is not a locate request. A non-compliant or a short notice notification is not a locate request. It is not valid. It never becomes valid, and it is not compliant with the law. Here's something else to keep in mind. It never becomes compliant. So if I put in a locate request on a Thursday and I say I'm going to be digging on Saturday, and then I get home and my significant other gets like, you need to wait until Tuesday. And so convinces me to wait. And then Wednesday, Thursday, whatever the case may be, I decide to get out there and start planting those trees. When I hit something, I am still responsible for those damages because I never put in a locate request. So it's very important to keep in mind. Like I said, this isn't on the professional side very often. We want to keep professionals safe. We don't want to put in non-compliant locate requests if we can avoid them. Emergencies we're going to dive into here in just a moment, so I'll come back to that here in just a second. Second or third notices, if somebody didn't make it out in time before your work to begin. Date and time, this is a prioritized escalated ticket, which means it's going to go back to that company that didn't respond in time, and then they should treat it as an emergency and get to it as quickly as possible for you so you can begin work. Demolition tickets, don't know how many of you are in the demolition industry, but it's just a two-step. It's where we're going to put in the first step of letting the utilities know to disengage from the structure 7 days in advance. And then it's only for the intent of demolition. And then 2 or 3 business days prior to the structure coming down or any digging, that's when the excavation locate is going to go out to them. And then damage reporting. It is mandatory in Oklahoma. So if you see any damages to lines, exposure, or damaged signs, pedestals, anything like that, or if unfortunately an accident happens on your work site, it is required by law to give us a call and let us know so that we can let the facility operators know that damages occurred in that area as well. So what is an emergency? Well, an emergency is a unavoidable situation that endangers life, health, or property. You want to give as much notice as possible, and as the exception to the 48 hours notice, because it is a emergency. You have to dig. It's to let those member companies know, but you do need to dig with care. So let's talk about the justification real quick, and then I'll talk to you a little bit about what to do out on the site. So emergency low care requests. So in Oklahoma, an emergency low care request is for excavation that is justified under circumstances where immediate digging is required because you have to protect life, health, or property. So we know that there's endangerment life, health, or property when it comes to things that's obvious, like electricity being out, telecom being out, water washing away streets or roads, things of that nature. We can see that, and it's pretty self-explanatory. A couple of those things that are kind of little gray area they may not think of. When I was an agent, I got a call from a farmer who let me know that he needed to repair a fence, and he asked for it to be an emergency. And on the surface, I said, I'm sorry, that won't be justifiable. We wouldn't be able to put that in as an emergency. And he let me know that his cattle was taken off, and that is an endangerment to property. So I did process that as a justified emergency low care request. When we take an emergency low care request, we say a phrase at the beginning of that phone call that says, when will you begin digging? The reason that we ask when you will be digging instead of when do you want the lines located is because we know when you want the lines to be located. We know that you want the lines to be located yesterday so that you can dig right now. We know that, right? It's pretty obvious. What we're asking is, when is a shovel going to be in the ground so that we can get to the member companies and give them as much notice as possible. So if it's going to take 6, 7, 8 hours for you to get a piece of equipment, parts for repair, a skilled worker who needs to do that one specific task, wherever it might be, we want to give as much notice as possible. The big third-party locating companies, they may have a company policy where they'll get to you within 2 hours, and that's great. But if you're in a rural area or dealing with a company that has fewer resources, if they see that you said a 0 hour notice or 1 hour notice and they didn't get the ticket until 3-4 hours later, they may not be able to respond under the assumption that you're already digging, and so they won't be able to help you. So when we ask, when will you be digging, we're looking for as much notice as possible to give. And it also tells the operators that they will get to you before a shovel gets into the ground. We know that not everybody hears when will you begin digging, and the question will be as soon as possible, or the answer will be as soon as possible, or now, or we need to get out there, things of that nature. And that's where we're going to start negotiating. We're, as an agent, they're going to start with 4 hours. If 4 hours is told no, then we'll try 2. And if 2 is no, then we'll negotiate from there. But we're going to try to give at least 2 hours, since that is company policy for some of the third-party locate companies, and we're trying to give as much notice as possible. So now that we know how much time is necessary, and we know that we need to look for justification, let's kind of think of a few of the examples. So if, when it comes to life or health, there needs to be a situation where people are at risk of injury or death, right? It's not just because there's a water leak. In itself, that is an endangerment to life, health, or property. But if that water leak is causing massive erosion, if it's like where fences or roads or anything like that's going to be washed away, then yeah, we can see that as justification. But if we say that just a water leak, just for the sake of repairing a water leak, we can't really justify that. So we want to be able to make sure that we're showing where there is an endangerment to life, health, or property. So some of those examples are going to be gas leaks, electrical hazards, and other urgent situations that pose a direct threat to human safety. Damage to property, we kind of talked about that, washing out fence lines or foundations of homes, or signage, or causing other issues because of washouts or other property damage because of, is an absolute reason for doing so. Service outage. These are going to be specific to life, health, or property. We understand that a person can't go without water for a long period of time, gas for heat and air, as well as electricity, telecommunications for home security systems, calling 911, things of that nature. All those are imminent, right? So if they're out and it needs to be repaired, and there's somebody using those services, we can justify that as an emergency. And then environmental hazards, where if there is a leak or something going on with a pipeline or something like that, then yes, it is a emergency locate, and justifiably so. And then public safety, if a traffic light or stop sign is down or something like that, we can see that as an emergency. Now, I do want to remind you that it has to be imminent. It isn't a hypothetical, right? I once got a phone call to let me know that they were installing some water mains, right? And they tried to put it as an emergency as a water main install. And I asked who lives in the home or where the water main is going to go to. And there's a new development and no houses and nobody lives there yet, all these other things. So there wasn't anything imminent that made it an endangerment to life, health, or property. So keep that in mind as well. We want to make sure that we can justify that it's an emergency and the timing is as much time as possible. Something to keep in mind is that within our law, there is a penalty for fraudulent requests. So those fraudulent requests may be excessive and unreasonable requests. This is usually if someone calls and they say, we're going to be putting in a row of electric poles, and then they tell us it's going to take them 2 months to do so. And so they say, yeah, we'll be done by September 1st. So they put in a ticket. They tell us that it's going to be done by August 1st. And then October comes around and the member companies and locators are saying that they haven't seen any excavation in the area. The project hasn't started, all those things. That's when those updates are unreasonable and excessive. And those operators can then invoice the excavator for making those requests. So we want to make sure, again, that we can justify and make sure that tickets are being used correctly. The other fraudulent request would be a non-emergency request. So the example I gave earlier, someone calls in saying, hey, we need to do this repair, or we need to do this type of work, and it's not affecting anything where there isn't an immediate or imminent endangerment to life, health, or property, then those operators could then invoice for that fraudulent request. Just keep in mind what the fraudulent request is truly doing. All operators have to respond to emergency requests, and if you put in an emergency request that is fraudulent, you're taking away from the response time from somebody prioritizing an emergency request for those that is an emergency and may cause damage over in that area. So we want to clean up the system as best as possible, make sure that the requests are justified, and making sure that the locators have an ample amount of time to help you dig safe around them. And then one last thing, when it comes to the markings or response, although an emergency locate request is not breaking the law in any way, shape, or form, it is a justified short notice locate request. It is not a green light to dig as you like without due diligence. You must dig safely. If a telecom company didn't have time to get out to you before you're digging and a telecom line gets hit, you can't just say, well, I put in my emergency request. I told them I was going to be digging in 30 minutes. No, that's not going to release you of liability from that. You're going to have to show that you were aware, that you did everything you could, which includes trying to wait as long as possible for locates, or that you can show that you had no clue that telecom would have been in that area because there's no pedestals or there isn't a house for miles, or whatever the case may be. So it's just a hard fight to make when it comes to damage claims on an emergency locate request. So you want to be able to give the member companies as much time and opportunity to mark their lines so you can dig safely around them. So that's pretty much the breakdown on emergency locate requests. What we're trying to do with this information today is just make sure that we're all on the same page. It needs to be justifiable. needs to give as much time as possible. And then making sure that we understand the resources that are necessary to make those fraudulent or to make those emergency locator requests happen by those locators. So a couple things just to let you know about. If you have any questions, now the time to throw them in. I'm going to be kind of just doing some promotion for future events with us for the next couple of slides, and we'll easily be done by 2:25 if no questions come this way. If you haven't already, we have a podcast called Digging Deep. Feel free to look us up on anywhere you listen to podcasts, whether it's your Spotify, Apple, or other podcast players. Feel free to look it up. We try to do an episode every month or so. And then we just recently started a new series called Safety Scoops, which are smaller, bite-sized podcasts, less than 10 minutes, where we talk about a specific safety topic. Then we have our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@Okie811. Look us up. We have plenty of our podcasts, our webinars, our tutorials, and other educational and informative videos there, as well as our website, which is okie811.org. And then if you have any questions or suggestions for other topics that we can do a dive into, let me know. Email address is easy enough. It's just the word education@okie811.org. I'll be happy to help you out. If you have some scenarios that you're not quite sure, based on our conversation, that it is or it isn't an emergency locator request, or how to put in that request and how it works, just let me know and we can help you out with that. And then finally, just thanks. I just wanted to show you my cool little critter logo, and we appreciate you.